Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald near Monticello at Allerton Park, standing in front of the Allerton Mansion. It's now also a retreat center. It's owned by the University of Illinois. Up until the 1940s, it was owned by the Allerton family. It has a very interesting history, which we're going to learn about during this program. We're also going to get a look inside this beautiful mansion, which now serves as a retreat center. And Brenda Abbott, you are the retreat center manager.
I am.
And you're going to take us through this house room by room. But first, a little bit about this mammoth home on the prairie. It's just sort of here, and it's a mystery to a lot of people.
It is, and it's an amazing mystery. The home was actually built by Robert Allerton in 1900, first inhabited in 1900. What amazes me is it was built for the sum of $50,000.
Wow.
When you think about what $50,000 got you then, what
wow.
$50,000 gets you today.
In 1900.
A big difference.
And what's the square footage?
The square footage is 32,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It was actually designed after Ham House in Surrey, England. That was Robert kind of decided on that after doing some travels and looking at different architecture types and trying to figure out what he wanted, and that's what he settled on was Ham House.
Yeah. I had heard a rumor that all the bricks that went into making this building were imported.
That's my understanding.
Wow.
Is they were all brought over from England by ship.
Now this 32,000 square foot mansion, you would think, well, Robert must have had a big family.
Actually, Robert didn't. Robert never married. He actually adopted a son, John Greg Allerton. The two of them lived here, and they entertained extensively. And when they weren't here, they were traveling the world looking for statuary and things to furnish their home with.
And I tell you, during this program, we're also going to get a look at some of that statuary. He was quite a collector. He was also quite a designer, because this reflecting pond, I assume, was his idea. Many of the features, even though maybe the house wasn't designed by him, many of the features were designed, and you can tell it was an artist's work, can't you, when you go inside? Robert
really believed in living his life as art, so everything about the home and how things are situated outside of the home, he really gave a lot of thought to. Something we don't see right now, but there are two sphinxes that actually face the home. Typically, those sphinxes would be facing out. He felt that, and the sphinxes were to protect things. He felt that the nature really needed to be protected more from man than man needed to be protected from nature.
Yeah. Wow. Well, not everybody gets to go in because it's a retreat center.
Correct.
While this park is open to the public, the house is not always, but you can take us in and our viewers get a chance to look, right?
I certainly can. I'd love to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, Brenda.
Beautiful room.
I'd have to say, this is the Grand Gallery.
This is our Grand Gallery. This is 20-foot ceilings.
Man.
All of the detail that you see was when the house was built in 1900. It's amazing to think that nowadays it might be mass-produced, or you would have somebody who would come in and do it. If you think about that being done by hand when the mansion was built in 1900, it's amazing. It's a beautiful detail that.
And you're talking about the crown molding,
the crown molding, yes.
Yeah. And of course, the paneling is gorgeous too. Here, it's painted. In many of the other rooms, it's still natural.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Of course, beautiful hardwood floors.
Yes, original hardwood floors.
This is where, I mean, this is probably for the retreat center. This would be an area where people could get away from their group meetings and come and just
good
sit
networking, socializing.
And then you call this the library, and I guess Mr. Allerton used it as a library as well, but it wasn't always a library, was it?
No, originally this was the music room. When it was a music room, of course, we didn't have the stacks. And then at some point after the home was built, it transitioned to the library. I've heard it being said that he kept outgrowing his library, that he really enjoyed books, and he just kept outgrowing it, so he had to.
Did he leave books?
He did leave books. The books that are original, there are, I think, 1,200 volumes, and they're on the second level. and they start at the coat of arms and go back around this way. The rest of them are books that, as the university stacks have gotten rid of old books, they'll call us and we'll go get them, and if they look period, we'll put them in here.
Yeah, well, it's one nice thing, a university does have books, and more books, don't they?
Yes, they do.
I also want to draw attention, I mean, this woodwork is gorgeous, but up above my shoulder up here on the wall, there's an immense oriental rug, which I assume was on the floor here at one time.
It was. There are 3 rugs here in the mansion that are originals. That is one of them. There's one located here, and then there's one in the solarium and one in our dining area.
So you decided to get that off the floor and have people stop walking on that rug.
Yes, that's correct.
Even though he liked to have people walk on it, didn't he?
That's correct.
You know, this is an interesting point. Robert Allerton gave this home to the University of Illinois. At the time, was that a big gift?
It was a big gift. At that time, it was one of the biggest gifts that was given to the University of Illinois. It was gifted in 1946, and shortly after that time, it started functioning as a conference center. So it mostly hosted scientific groups that were maybe based at the university. Since that time, we've grown quite a bit. We do about 160 meetings, weddings, and conferences a year.
Wow.
So it has changed quite a bit. And of course, when the home was built, they never envisioned that it would be used as this. So there are some challenges that we have sometimes using it as for social function space. And
let's continue this conversation as we go.
Sure.
So he in the 1930s, was it that he bequeathed this to the university?
1946.
1946. Okay, and then he and his son moved to Hawaii.
They moved to Hawaii. They actually built another home there, quite different than this. It's right on the beach. It's more of a beach home, if you will. And that is now part of the National Botanic Gardens.
Ah, okay. And he took all his almost all his furniture with him.
Took almost all of his furniture. We do have 2 pieces that we are certain belong here, or were original pieces. The other pieces that you see that are older, we suspect that they may have been belong here. There was no inventory when he left here of furniture, because it was either sold, or he took it with him, or it was gifted to employees. And so as some of those employees have aged and their family have found the connection, they will call us and say, I have a piece that I believe is part of the Allerton estate. But because there was no inventory, the only way that we can truly tell that it was belonged here is if we can verify it through pictures. Some of the older pictures.
We're in the oak room.
We are in the oak room.
And he, you know, I don't know if you all named it that or he named it that, but it's not very mysterious. It's kind of straightforward.
This actually, I'm fairly certain that the names were given to the rooms after the university was gifted the property. This actually was Robert's office. And it said that, you know, he might invite you out to the terrace to have a cup of tea while he was meeting with you. But this was his office originally. The picture that you see above the library, above the fireplace, is actually his godmother.
He was an interesting person. He never married.
He never married.
He adopted his son.
He adopted his son.
And that was not common in that day and age, was
he
it?
was the first adult in Illinois to adopt another adult.
I'll be darned. I'll be darned. And then they, later in life, moved to Hawaii.
They moved to Hawaii.
And just left this place.
And they left this place to the university, and that's how we ended up with it today.
Okay, Brenda, we're still on the main level.
We are on the main level.
We've crossed the grand gallery again, and we've come into a room that was the solarium when it was built.
Originally the solarium.
All of this would have been open to the sunlight.
It would have. Originally, all of the panes would have been glass. At some point, it was glass because the house was designed after the Ham House in England. In England, a conservatory or solarium would have the glass would have allowed it to heat in the winter and cool in the summer. Because our environment's different here, it just didn't. It didn't quite work that way. So at some point, the glass was covered up, and we still call it the solarium.
And you can see when you look at the floor, you can see that this is a totally different floor. This is made to be home to the elements. You know, sun and water, and I mean, it's brick. It's It's made for the outdoors. And then, of course, you get this wonderful view outside. You got a koi pond and the major pond. And that's the view that we had when we first looked at the house.
It is.
That's the most attractive view,
That's the
even though
meadow
it's the
view.
back of the house, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Let's walk this way.
Okay.
And because there's another room I want to make sure that we get into here. And this is for like receptions and luncheons and things like that.
Yes.
The butternut room. I love the way you make it simple. I know what the paneling is. This was not a library, I guess, or was it a library?
No, originally this was the formal dining room. It was designed as a formal dining room. After it was designed as a formal dining room, they found that they just didn't dine very formally. They were here mostly during the warmer months, and they like to eat outside. You see a lot of pictures with them on the terrace with blankets, having their picnic. Then it became the library.
It still works very well as a library.
It does still
It's
work
a
very
gorgeous room. Place to just sit down, open a book, and just get away from it for a while.
And what is interesting is the picture that we see behind us actually is a picture of Robert Allerton as a young man. It was painted in when he was 24 years old. And
good-looking young man.
yeah, he was. It was said it was painted by a friend of his, and who believed that you could tell a lot about somebody's soul by their hands. And you'll notice that he's hiding his hands. But it's one of our centerpieces here is the picture of Robert as a young man.
Before you and I go upstairs, I want to show the camera out here through this doorway. And there's the grand staircase that goes up. It's a double staircase once you get up to the landing upstairs. And I don't know if Robert would like this or not, but we're going to go up and see his bedroom. You think would he allow that?
I think he'd allow that.
Okay. Brenda, it was a long walk down a long hall
It was.
to get to Robert's bedroom.
Was the farthest point from the front door.
Yeah, he wanted to be away. He wanted his privacy, didn't he?
He did. That was how English manor homes were built in those days.
This is available as a bridal suite.
It is. We rent this as a bridal suite. We do many weddings throughout the year. We do weddings and wedding receptions here, in addition to meetings.
Yeah. Not much to mention here, except he wanted a round room. That went with the style on this end of the house.
It did. It was very important to him that when the home was designed, that his home had what he would have called the three views. When he originally came to this land, all of the trees that you see, he planted most of those. So you would see from one window you would have seen the Sangamon River, from one you would have seen the great expanses of the meadow, and from the other window you would have seen the formal gardens. And that was very important to him. He was very interested in living his life as art, and so he wanted to see the art that was outside of this house as well.
One more stop before we leave here. Let's go in the bathroom here, because the one reason I want to take a look at that is because I understand that the vanity, at any rate, is original, even though the marble floor is not, I guess.
That is correct. The vanity is one of the two original vanities that are still left in the house.
Very, very, very attractive room. What a beautiful mansion. Bruce Branham, it's difficult to get a bad view out here. Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at the sort of the side back of the house, and it's just a beautiful place.
It's a gorgeous place, and whenever I come out here, I'm always kind of pinching myself, saying, "How did I fall into this?" Because it's just a gorgeous place
job,
to be.
Huh? Yeah. We're going to talk about the history of this place and the Allerton family a little bit, but first, we've taken a look at this beautiful facility, and people might be wondering, what is it used for?
Right. Well, we're constantly kind of come up with ways to better utilize it, but our main business for the mansion is weddings and conferences. And we used to be very insular. It was just for the university. And we're trying to open this up now to open up more to the general public. So one of the things we trialed this year is we had some weekends where we were open. You could treat it just like a hotel. Come in and stay, have breakfast in the morning, bed and breakfast kind of thing. And we hope to do that more in the future. And then I think a lot of it, though, is we're going to try to have events here. We want people to come out and enjoy the mansion, but then also the park. Because really what we found in our surveys is that people really come, they like the mansion, but they come for the park. 1,500 acres of really pristine wilderness, hiking trails, the gardens, the sculptures. It's really a unique place.
Yes, it is. It is. Who were the Allertons, and how did they come by the fortune that it took to buy and build this?
Well, like a lot of families, I think the war was a key thing. For Samuel Allerton was Robert's father, and Samuel dabbled in trading cattle or providing cattle. And when the Civil War was going on, he used Chicago area as his base and made that kind of started the Chicago stockyards and started supplying the Union Army with pork and beef.
Okay.
And that really made his fortune for him. Speculation, you might say, in those areas. And then he built the stockyards, he started a bank in Chicago, he became very, very wealthy.
Now, did he purchase property down here?
He
or
did.
He did. He purchased.
He did. He purchased, he had 12,000 acres of farmland plus this property, which he couldn't farm. So he had 13,500 acres altogether, but 12,000 was the working farm, which he called the farms. I think at his height he had something like 90,000 acres of land throughout the United States and that he farmed, or that he had other people farm. Robert, his son, was an aspiring artist. And Dad was very wealthy. Dad sent him to the best schools. He went to the 1890 exposition up in Chicago, and he just became enthralled with art, the art that was displayed there. And so he told his dad, I want to become an artist. And his dad was like, oh,
what have I done?
What have I done to deserve this? But he, to his dad's credit, he said, okay, I'll give you some money, and you're not going to have a lot, but you'll be able to live comfortably. And so he and a friend from Chicago went over, and they spent, I think, 2 or 3 years studying art, trying to become artists. And in 18, it was like 97 or 98, Robert apparently burned all his paintings, said, I don't have the talent. And he came back home and he went to his dad, and again, to Robert's credit, he said to his dad, I think I want to do some farming. So his dad said, well, I got this property down in Monticello, and you can have it. And so he came down here and started making plans for this building. And this was started, I believe, in like 1899 and opened in 1900.
And he designed the home.
Well, he had an architect friend, and he took him with him over to Europe, and they surveyed all these colossal properties in Europe, and he settled on Ham House, which is in Surrey, England, was kind of the genesis or the basis for the design. So I don't think he actually designed it himself, and in fact, he had John Borey was the architect who came in and really did the drawings, did the design. And of course, initially this carriage was the barn.
This with the
carriage
latticed windows here.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's where they kept the horses. And then, of course, once cars came along, Robert, with his money, was one of the first to get rid of the horses and put and start. And so this has become now. We've made that into our dining facility, and the connection was also built by Robert later on after the place was put together.
And if we look over your right shoulder here, this beautiful flat lawn here that's perfect grass, this looks like it was planned for something.
Well, that's a good question. We call it the bowling lawn. I assume Robert was big on parties and having people, his society friends from Chicago down, and I assume they came out here to just stroll and relax. And they had elaborate costumes that they would wear. He was big into art all his life. And the interesting thing is, you go through the rest of the park, you'll see a lot of sculptures here. He farmed, and he was here. He was in charge, and he would farm up until the harvest in November. And then in November, he would be gone, and he would be in Europe or Asia or all over the world. And when he saw art that he liked, he would buy it and bring it back here.
So Dad continued to be generous to Robert, because obviously the money for this house must have come from Dad, because Robert wasn't earning it as an artist.
Correct.
And these trips to Europe weren't cheap either, so he was financing him through all that, I assume.
To a certain extent, although with 12,000 acres of farmland, he was generating a fairly good income for himself. So he had that, but his dad had the stock in the bank that he gave Robert early on.
Yeah.
So Robert was on a lot of boards. He had money, and back then, he had, I think, an annual income of around 1900, around 100,000 a year, which now is like 4.5 million or some very healthy sum, along with assets. So he did not ever want for anything, and he was very generous. He gave all over town. The the library here. He built the road that leads to Monticello. He paid for because he wanted a way to get his crops to the elevator. So.
And the partiers, they had to be able to get out
Had
here.
to be able to get his friends out here as well. So yeah, absolutely. But it was truly an interesting guy. And then if we fast forward to 1946, during the war when he was traveling, he stopped in Hawaii a couple times. And he found this property on Kauai that he really liked. And so he started spending more time there and more time there. And by sometime in the mid-40s, he decided that was where he wanted to spend his time.
And he and his son moved there.
They moved there, and they gifted this property to the University of Illinois in 1946, along with, I believe it was 6,000 acres of farmland. And the other 6, because of his generosity to the arts, he gave to the Chicago Art Institute.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Derek Peterson, who's the beautiful lady that we're looking at here?
This was actually one of the last statues to be brought to Allerton. It was purchased by Robert, and the title of the statue is Lady in the Scarf. And it depicts a woman sitting on a beach sunbathing. Yep, very beautiful.
This 1,500 acres of heaven here adjoins the mansion that we've been looking at.
That's right.
And it's all not all formal garden, but a lot of it is, isn't it?
Yeah, there's about 80 acres of formally maintained space at Allerton Park, and the rest of it's natural areas. And in that natural areas, we have over 14 miles of hiking trails, so there's plenty to explore out there as well.
Yeah. So you probably get a good number of your visitors are those who just want to park and walk. Huh?
That's right. That's right. Yep. Hiking. Bring your dog out and walk them. Yeah, it's a wonderful time out here.
We are, though, I mentioned this rectangle. This is probably the most formal of your gardens. What's this called?
This is called the brick-walled garden. This was Allerton's first garden. It was built in 1905. It was originally his vegetable garden, and in fact, when you talked about this beautiful lady, where her pedestal sits underneath of that is still a dipping pool, and that's how he would irrigate this. So even to this day, there's still remnants of the way Allerton left it when he left it to the university in 1946.
This whole area was vegetables.
Oh yeah, so when you see the boxwood hedge and it kind of makes the square shape, that was actually carrot back. Robert would plant it in carrot. So he was a very form meets function type of guy, yeah.
What in the heck would he do with all that produce? I mean, it was just him and his son living here, right?
Right.
He must have taken it to a farmer's market or had people come out and take it away, I guess.
Quite possibly,
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
He also, though we mentioned, like, he lived his life as art.
That's right.
He was an art fanatic. And much of what you have here, besides the gardening, is statuary and outdoor art.
That's right, yeah. In fact, I heard an interview with John Gregg, Robert's son, in early 1980s, and he talked about how Robert considered himself a failed painter, but he would paint with the landscape, and he would paint with the trees and the natural areas as his canvas, and the gardens would be his art. So
the nice thing about that is your art changes throughout the year.
That's right.
You know, you don't have to keep repainting the canvas.
Yeah.
It does it on its own.
Yeah, I'm often asked what the best season is, and I can't choose, really. They're all different. They all have their good points.
And you've been through a lot of them because you have spent a lot of sweat and tears keeping this place up, haven't you?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've been here about 7 years, and 6 of those were actually maintaining the space, the formal gardens, some of the natural areas. So yeah.
It's beautiful. Now you have
Thank
help.
you.
You have maybe a dozen full-time employees who help you keep it up, mow. And how many miles of hedges do you have?
There's over 2 miles of formal hedge that we maintain, so it takes about a week to cut the whole thing. So yeah.
Well, Derek, thank you so much for the visit, and your colleagues who also helped us on this program. There's no way that we could share everything that Allerton Park has with you in one 30-minute program. So I've talked my photographer into coming back, and they're going to let us come back here to Allerton Park to shoot another program, and Derek is going to take us on a tour of the outdoor part of this park, and we'll see the gardens. With another Illinois story in Monticello, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.